Hello and welcome to the Zach Thinks Share podcast. Today, I have the opportunity to talk with Stephanie. Stephanie is the CEO of Hello Nanny. We got to meet at Mom 2.0 this year, hearing kind of her story behind why she started this company, what the challenges were that she went through, and like the education she had to put out there, I think was really helpful. So, Stephanie, thank you for coming today and chatting with us. I'm certainly selfishly looking forward to asking a couple things to better understand like the dynamics of what a nanny is. And I feel like there's probably some, I don't know if the word stigma or like stereotyping of like who can have a nanny, but tell me a little bit about like, maybe just kick us off with what was the story that kind of had you want to kick this off and have this be like a service that you knew needed to exist in the world?
Yeah, so I started the agency not begrudgingly. I hired a nanny begrudgingly. My husband, when I found out when we found out we were pregnant, told me from the very beginning, we need to hire support. And for me, I said, absolutely not. Like, I'm going to raise my son. I will not have someone else raising my son for me. And I had that ideology because of my past. My biological mom left when I was 5, so there were deep-seated wounds there that existed around that rhetoric. And so the idea that I was hiring someone to help me was like this stigma that's out there, that hiring support for your family or hiring a nanny for your kids, that you're outsourcing your parenting to that nanny. And that was the same mindset that I had because that's what's out there. And I found myself very quickly becoming resentful to my husband because he travels a lot for work. And I felt like I was in a marriage where I was a married single mom all over again. History kind of repeating itself. My first marriage had an undertone of that as well. So when I went into my marriage with my husband, the second husband, I had very clear conversations with him about our partnership, what that looked like, what I would tolerate, what I wouldn't, and what I wanted that to look like. And we were very clear. We were aligned. We had all those conversations. And then when it came to time to have our son, I found myself falling back into that married single mother feeling, or married single wife. And so it was at our son's first pediatric appointment. We were arguing in the pediatrics office, and the pediatrician came in, and she went from being pediatrician to marriage counselor. And I can laugh now, but at the time we weren't laughing. And she was like, hey, you too. And he was like, my husband said, I've been telling her from the moment we found out we were having our son to hire support, and she refuses. And the pediatrician looked at me and was like, are you crazy? Your husband's offering to hire a nanny. Like, do you know what someone would give to have a nanny? And I was like, yeah, but I'm not going to have someone else raising my son. She was like, someone's not raising your son. You're just accepting support. And so we walked out of that meeting, and I agreed to my husband that I would hire a mother's helper. So I hired the mother's helper. The mother's helper quickly evolved into our full-time nanny. It was a revelation for me as someone who was self-sufficient, that was prideful, that, didn't want help, because in my eyes, accepting help meant that I was failing as a mom. And so I hired the support. And I attribute that support to, 1, saving my marriage, 2, setting my son up for success developmentally, because she brought to the table early childhood education and child development that I, as a parent, didn't have professional training in. I'm a communications major, but unfortunately you can't teach a 6-month-old how to get on a stage and speak, right? Mm. So my professional training didn't correlate into motherhood. It didn't. And so I was very fortunate to be able to hire someone who had that background and was able to give the one-to-one care for our son. And through that care, as a parent, I was even able to learn, because I went into my son as a second-time mom 13 years after my daughter, thinking very confidently, I've got this. I've done this before. I know what I'm doing. And I was quickly humbled because the way that I parented my daughter was very different than the way I had to parent my son. He was just different. If I said left, he went right. If I said up, he went down. And I was able to watch my nanny, who had experience in early childhood education and child development, handle him in ways that I was like, how did you do that? And there were times where I was taking notes from her. And it was just a game changer, not only for my son, but also for my family and for my marriage. And I attribute our nanny to saving my marriage.
You know, you had said at the beginning, like, that one of the things that you struggled with was like, I don't want someone else raising our child. And I think there have been a handful of moments I think Liz and I have talked about over the years, especially before we had kids, like, yeah, maybe we'll homeschool our kids. I think we certainly have fears that like the creativity is just going to be like stressed out of her by the end of elementary school. And I feel like think for both of us, like we had to re-find creativity after K through 12 education. And the second thought was like, so I was a math teacher for 8 years, and I was like, I'll be great at teaching math, teaching English, and all that other stuff. Like, I don't feel confident in teaching her those things. And like, coming in earlier, like thinking, and not a whole, like, yeah, teaching was some kind of good training, at least for classroom management and behavior management. But at the same time, it wasn't really all that great of training for kind of what you were saying. It doesn't translate that same way. And there have been a lot of moments where I'm like, I'm glad that our child gets to go to preschool and to daycare, because those people have all the art materials, they have all the knowledge, they have so many things built there for them. And I think that's definitely something I still think about. I think Alyssa still struggles with, is like, I don't want someone else raising her kid. It seems like a crime sometimes, like, to have them away from the house for 40 hours a week when we're supposed to be their most strong bonds. So I think hearing you say my professional training did not translate over to motherhood is like almost something that like bridges the gap of like that fear and like the logic that goes with it. Because I think the other counter argument that we probably hear from same people that are screaming breast is best are probably, they're saying things like that moms and women like should have all this kind of training and have all this inherently from just being a mother. And I think there are a good handful of things that come natural, I think, to Alyssa and even to me, but there's probably more things that do not come naturally.
Yes, and I would say that, and you mentioned that people feel guilty for even having their child in daycare for 40 hours a week, right? Like that guilt that even comes with having your child in daycare. And it's like, there's been some rhetoric going around surrounding that. Guilty, like there's already enough shame out there. We don't need to perpetuate that shame. And furthermore, I also bring to the discussion the argument that under-supported parents creates dysregulated parents. Dysregulated parents drives
Worse parenting.
Short-fused, angry parenting. And as someone who was raised in a family of 8 kids, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and that was her job, my nervous system from her screaming 24/7 is still to this day, like I can't handle a ton of, that's why I only have 2 kids and they're 13 years apart, is because I can't handle that. Like even my nephews, there's 3 of them, they are like the 3 musketeers, there's 4 actually, but the 3 oldest ones, because the one is still a baby, he's 10 months old. They are like the 3 musketeers, they're so tight knit. But I candidly tell my sister, I can take these 2 or this one, because the 2 alphas, it's too much for me. We have 2 alphas in that group that want to be the leaders, and they butt heads and they are like fire and gasoline. And then my other nephew and my son being the alpha, get along great because his cousin is very easygoing, go with the flow, and it works great. But the 3 of them all together, like, I can't do it. I can't handle it. And I know my limits. And I will say that stems from my childhood, where my stepmom was under-supported and short-fused. And there was a lot of other stuff that we could talk about that goes even further than that. So for the parents that are kicking themselves for having their child in daycare, your future children will thank you when their nervous system is regulated and when they had engaged, connected, balanced, loving, patient parents.
Yeah, which I know for sure my patience is, it's not toast by the end of the day, but like if I'm with her for the full day, it's like I'm much less likely to have it in me to be the best version of Father Zach that I want to be giving to her. There's a wide gap between, I think, people having their first nanny or having their first service and then deciding to create a company based on that and make that happen and make that available for other people. What led to you deciding that you needed to build the service and give more people access to being able to have these conversations and this kind of support?
Yeah, so when I started the process to hire, I looked into working with agencies. And what I found was that most agencies charge 15 to 25% of a nanny's annual salary. So the decision to hire support in your home is already a premium. And then when you add in the agency model, it's almost near impossible unless you are high net worth or ultra high net worth and high household incomes. And so what I found was that it was cost prohibitive for many families, dual working families, to even leverage the agency. Because that fee, for example, where I'm from in the San Francisco area, is easily $1,000 agency fee based on those market rates. And so I created a fixed fee model that gave access to more families. And then take that one step further as we've developed the agency, and I found a need for more of a DIY hybrid model to where it's a much lower investment for families, but for those of them taking on the search on their own, they can tap into our agency, to our recruiter, to our resources, our guides, everything that they need to effectively hire and set both them and their nanny up for success. Or if that's a family assistant or house manager, that either whatever they hire in the home, that they are set up for success with that person that they hire, and that person can become an extension to their family and grow with them for years to come. Because one of the things that's really important is continuity and stability in a child's life. And so if they have someone, they have a revolving door of candidates where there's this just very transactional, disposable ideology today that exists, then that's to a detriment, I believe, to the children. And so how can we create a partnership that is equitable and harmonious for both sides and sustainable for both sides so that this person can be an extension to the family for years to come and just create a better overall environment for the family?
Yeah, I mean, I think there have definitely been moments where, at least I have, I don't know if Alyssa has considered, like, I would love to have a nanny. I think, I love you, Dad. You're right now at the park with our toddler, and he's getting a little older. He's a little bit. He can't throw up he can't throw her on his shoulders the way I can, and like I have little to no health concerns for me being able to meet her needs, and knowing that we can have someone able-bodied and like skilled and or certified in things, like my mind would rest a lot easier, even just while we're recording this right now, while that's happening. What do you think are some of the mental hurdles that a lot of moms or dads struggle to get through to choose a path that ends up regulating their nervous system because they're getting more support?
Yeah, so I would say more than anything, it's just that affordability. I can't afford to have that type of support. But if you think outside of the box and you figure out how can we position our life in a way so that we can afford this, because it doesn't have to mean that you have someone full-time. It can mean that you have someone 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week. It could also mean that someone is, you bring someone into the home to work 10, 20 hours a week on the domestic load. So that 20 hours a week that you give to the domestic load buys back time for you to have with your spouse, or time with your child, or time to be at those extracurricular activities and really in the moment at those extracurriculars, because you aren't thinking about all of the things that you need to do when you get home, stressed out, short fused, and just like, oh, I can't even be here right now. I need to be at home taking care of XYZ. Knowing that when you go home, dinner's on the table.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think is one of the, like, yeah, because I definitely, money is, I think, it's an issue for us, but I think it's definitely one of the first hurdles that I think we'd probably see any kind of large price tag and grimace at, especially because we're preschool is not cheap at the 3.5-year-old stage.
Well, and if
What are
you,
some of the? Go ahead.
I would say if you think about restructuring your life so that you can afford it and prioritize the things that are important to you. So, does that mean, for these first 3 years of life, we just don't go on any vacations? We don't buy any Louis Vuittons and Gucci's, right? That we don't buy into the things that as a society just like put us into, we're consumers at our core, and we're persuaded by acquiring things like purses or belts or whatever the thing is, a flashy car, right? Where it's like, am I willing to forego those fancy purchases, driving the nice car, so that I can have a family assistant, or I'm not going to eat out? We're not going to eat at restaurants. I calculated what we spent eating out, my family, and found what I needed to hire my family assistant just in the money that we spent eating out.
Wow.
So I said I could afford to hire someone in lieu of eating out. And my husband was like, yeah, but I really enjoy eating out. It's kind of a social thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I enjoy not having to think about what I'm going to have for dinner that night, or what I'm making for dinner that night, or the groceries and all the planning that goes into the domestic load. I'd rather not eat out. And I'd rather delegate those funds to the support that I prefer at home. And so it's figuring out, what are those things? How can you trim the fat in your life on unnecessary expenditures to have the support that you need? It's really about prioritizing what's important to you. Do you care about what people think of you? Do you care about, the message that you send by the car that you drive, or the ring that you wear, the diamond earrings, or whatever it is? Then keep doing that. But if you want support,
I'm
prioritize
trying to
that.
I'm trying to think about what are the things that you're saying here that fit for us. I mean, we don't buy anything designer. We have 6+ year old cars. We eat out only on Fridays, and we go from the same place. I would say it costs about $40. So I'm trying to figure out what the fat would look like for us. I mean, I think right now we're looking at Alyssa possibly having a career shift, so that would probably play into it. But I don't know if there's any fat trimming that we can do that we haven't already had.
Mm-hmm.
So money is the number one thing. Do you think that there are also like, is that just like a number one, nothing's even close to it? Or is there like a number
I would say
two
that's the
hurdle
first.
that comes close?
Yeah, the first barrier is finances. The second barrier is pride, that I can do this without help. I need to do it all. And and then there's that stigma of there's this whole thing going on, and we're actually launching Show Me Your Village, which is to show that there are so many behind the scenes support systems that a lot of people aren't privy to because of the stigma, because of the comments that people make for the people that do have these support systems. That must be nice. Oh, your privilege is showing, right? And those are the reasons why people don't want to hire support, or if they do, they pretend that they don't have it.
Yeah, it
And so
reminds
that would
me,
be the other thing.
I don't remember this movie all that well. I think it was Grown Ups with Adam Sandler and his crew there. And they're all eating out. It's the one that we probably all remember, the movie trailer of the girl says chocolate wasted. I want to get chocolate wasted. But there's this dinner scene where they're all eating around. I think Adam and his wife, they had a nanny, and I think if I'm remembering it right, like they were pretending that she was a foreign exchange student that was running around like with their family, and they were like making sure to have a bunch of giant books on hand so that it looked like she was like an exchange student. And I think I'm trying to remember who it was that was afraid of the judgment, but I think it was that maybe Adam Sandler was afraid of his guy friends like having judgment that like, ooh, they were
Mm-hmm.
all high and mighty for being able to like afford help. That'll have to be a good short form piece of content for you to react to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even my husband caught himself. He stopped when I asked him to do the production with me a few weeks ago to share our story. Well, the guys and what they're going to say. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Did you say that you're concerned about what your colleagues are going to think? And he was like, no, 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 no.
Mm,
Oh, I'm good. He's very camera shy, he's a behind the scenes guy, doesn't do the camera at all, not even on social media. And so, but he did it for me because he loves me and he really believes in and sees firsthand, what this has done for our family. And so he stands behind it. But there is that even in, his world, in the corporate world where he's like, my colleagues, what are they going to think or what are they going to say, and standing up against that and saying like, I'm going to do this anyway, regardless of what they say. And then there's the other layer to that where my husband runs a company with 150 employees and he's always concerned about the optics, right? Like I don't want to send a bad message to the people that work for me. But the reality is that when you're in a C-suite position, when you're on the road 50% of the time, his employees might view this as a privilege. Oh, wow, he can afford a nanny, right? But to me, it's not a privilege. It's not a privilege to have your spouse on the road that much.
mm,
And the livelihood of the people that work for the company that he runs depends on him boots on the ground.
mm.
And if it wasn't for him boots on the ground, he wouldn't have the workload that he has that fuels the business to maintain the employees and the jobs that he maintains and provides. So he takes the livelihood of all of those people very serious. Like it's a huge responsibility that he carries. And consequently, his family has to sacrifice time with him as a result of that. His contribution on the home front is sacrificed as a result of that. And so the solution to that is hiring support so that I am not a single mom 50% of the time, so that I have a partner at home.
So I know you're saying that there's optics involved. There's concern that he will be received a certain way that might undermine his leadership or might undermine the way that he's perceived as someone that is delivering orders. What would you say? I don't know if you can share this, but what would you say the biggest fear is that, like, if someone were saying what they wanted to say, like that maybe they're thinking, like, what is the biggest fear for him around what someone could be thinking?
Well, that, they should also have a nanny. If you can afford a nanny, why can't I afford a nanny, right? And so that there's this expectation that if you make enough that you can afford a nanny, then I should also make enough so that I can afford a nanny. And so there's that like push pull of we only have a nanny because, or we don't have a nanny anymore, but we have the family assistant 20 hours a week because that makes up for his absence, right? And so we wouldn't, if he wasn't on the road giving his 50% of his life to this career, he would be home to help and he wouldn't need to afford that family assistant, right? But he does. And so there's just an element that people don't understand is that there's a cost tied to that sacrifice. And so does that mean that, he does have a higher income as a result of the command of his role? Absolutely. And so there's this, conversation going around about equity and equality and all these things, which as a woman that's been displaced from the workforce, that's had those same adversities, even as a single mom at one point, like I uphold those and it's very like dear and empathetic to like my heart because I've lived it, I've walked it. But then there's the other side of the coin where there's a lot of C-suite executives and there's this like challenge to say, well, these C-suite executives are getting overly paid, but they're really not because they are being paid to compensate for the workload at home that's essentially abandoned as a result of their absence.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I think about my role right now, right? So I mean, I left my sales job so that I could pursue this full time. I think, listen, I made a fair amount of sacrifices so that I could do this because I enjoy this a lot more than selling software. But I think we've been making financial sacrifices so that both of us could be a lot more at home and present with our toddler in her first years. And I could easily see where there could be moments on this journey where I'm saying, okay, maybe it would be better if I were like, I'm working on my book proposal. I'm hoping to have it sold in the next couple months. And one of the questions being asked is like, do you want to do speaking engagements and being on the road? And there may be a time where it makes a lot of sense for me to be on the road and bring in a lot more money, but also like sacrificing some time with our child, but making sure that that sacrifice, even if the me being the one that's being that role, that that role is still getting filled. And if the finances of that are what am I trying? I think you guys get what I'm trying to say, but
There's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. And like what you said, you gave up your sales career, which I did too. I gave up my career in software sales previously, but my latest role that I left was medical device sales. So same sales background. But it was so important to me that I pursued this mission because it was so near and dear to my heart. It was a revelation for me when I realized what the support did for myself, my son, and my marriage. I was like, this is worth taking a leap and leaving this career, this foundation, this guarantee of a paycheck that I
security of a
have,
yeah W-2
security,
job.
really great work-life balance to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, I'm crazy. Call me crazy. But I did it because it's something that I'm passionate about. Furthermore, I know that families need to hear this and my story needs to be shared and told because that's the only way that we as a culture will have change and good change, positive change. And that, it is a sacrifice, but there is something better coming from it. And I think that's your point, is that there's a sacrifice there and it could mean time with your family. But long term, what does that mean for society as a whole, for the work that you're doing? And also, what does that mean for your son and your wife in your absence?
Let me ask you this. I feel like I was a content creator first, coach second, although I'm trying to switch those roles sort of. I often ask myself, okay, if I could only say one message in a video and I had to make that 365 days a year and just change the flavor of saying it every day, the one message I think for me would be mental it exists, it's hard. Here's an example of it. And continuing to create sort of relatable things. What is the one message that if you had to just keep drilling into people's brains, like what is the one piece of education that you think needs to get out there? One, obviously for your service and your company to grow, but for the world to be a better place.
So first, before I get into that, I would say to provide the context that historically, our society was built on community, on being raised in communities, in community, with our neighbors, with our aunts, with our uncles, with our cousins, with our dads, our moms, all the things. And that culture is kind of a dying breed. There are so many people that are transplanted. There are so many aging parents that just don't even have the ability to care for themselves, let alone for our kids to help us. And the reality is that so many people are relying on, so many modern day families are relying on modern day support systems. And so it would be that the one thing I would say is support is your superpower. That's it. Support is your superpower. You will be a better parent, a better spouse, a better all the way around for yourself, and your kids will benefit from those support systems because you are a better parent with support and better human.
It's I remember reading an article a couple of years ago about the kind of rise of how superheroes have really taken over the airways of entertainment, and how I think we love superheroes because they have this awesome ability that really no one else has. And so it's almost like what you're saying, from the Marvel universe, is that maybe we stop embracing this idea of, let's say, like, I guess all of them have their backstories. I'm trying to think of that.
Self-sufficiency?
Well, I was gonna say, like, there's some of them that they were just born different, right? Like the X-Men, or I'm trying to think
Mm-hmm.
of, I guess the Hulk had a potion, Spider-Man got bitten by a spider. But my first thought is, let's say the Hulk was less chemical, and that's just like how their being was. Everyone says, well, that's a superpower, but you're saying no, it's more like everyone should embrace the Iron Man thing, where yeah, he's smart, but it's much more about the technology and the support that surrounds his body that makes him super, and how he utilizes that much more so than an innate ability. Similar with like Captain America,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was injected with a syringe and gave him superhuman stuff. Um, Remembering that, maybe this is a macro metaphor, is that all of them have their backstory, and appreciating what
Well,
they're injected with or what their armor is
I
much
think
more
that
of what
goes,
makes them super.
yes, and this goes to that point of show me your village, and what we are
Mm,
actually launching next month in May is comparison is a big thing in our society, right? We always are comparing ourselves, comparing to our neighbor, comparing to our friends, all the things. And where do we stack up compared to them? And I lost you. There you are. And the reality is that some families have superpowers. So when those superpowers could be a family assistant, a house manager, a nanny, right? All those support systems that you don't see are their superpowers that give them the ability to perform the way that they do. For example, my husband building this business to where it is today. His ability to do that is because of the support that he has at home. If he didn't have those superpowers at home, I would not let him go. I would make him stay home. And he would be in the trenches here with me, and he would be cleaning and doing dishes and doing laundry and doing all the things. But instead, because we have that superpower that people obviously know about this, right? Because I talk openly about it. But most people don't talk openly about those superpowers. Oh my gosh, I'm a Zach sandwich. Are you getting is the system messing up?
I'm so confused what's happening with my technology. My headphones died. I'm scared. I'm probably really echoey or fudgicles.
I mean, it's working.
Okay.
We'll just have a Zach sandwich.
All
There's
right.
two. There you go. There you go.
All right. I think
I was in between two photos of you. Essentially, to your point about the superpowers is show me your village. There are families who have those superpowers, that there are, people who are able to perform to that capacity, that are able to, like in your case, what is it that's going to facilitate you to successfully go on those speaking engagements and pursue that book? It's because you're going to have some level of a superpower at home that facilitates that, so that your wife isn't left holding the bag in the trenches by herself. And the reality is that many people don't share those secret superpowers because of the stigma that comes with it. So we all just pretend like we're all doing it on our own when really we're not.
yeah. And as I was like struggling with the conundrum of like talking about the different superheroes and all of their backstories, it was like when they made all the individual movies, like I didn't know necessarily that Captain America he was injected with a syringe. I didn't know originally that the Hulk had like some chemicals infused in him. I didn't know that um, Captain Marvel, the woman, like I didn't know that she had like some radioactive stuff that she was exposed to. So those backstories, it sounds like are huge for us to change how we see those things. I know I forget her name.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I can see her face. That space gal or that space gal. She was one of the ones that went on that recent rocket to the outer space. But she was talking about like she's a model. She is an astronaut. She has like her own YouTube channel that almost got bought by Netflix for like teaching science on the internet. And she made a video talking about like here are all the things like here's all the she didn't even necessarily say privileges, but she pointed out all the support that she has in home for her to be able to do those things. And I think I was really glad that I came to the conclusion that, even my presence online, like I benefit from privilege of being just male privilege has really helped me along the way that I haven't fully realized. And I think when we show our cards like that, it normalizes the rest of us being able to like be okay with our own scenario and ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
You had said to
And
me before we started recording something about the nanny link, and I wanted to ask before we call it here is, I mean, you help people pair with nannies. You help people get that support. Yes, there's the education, the philosophical side of it.
Mhm.
Tell me more about what people can benefit from working with you.
So people that work with our agency can benefit from having access to the agency model, all the tools, the resources, the guides, everything that will set you up for success and long-term success, so that you don't end up with a revolving door of candidates. And so whether that's vetting service, there's a lot of platforms out there, moms groups, there's so many places to access talent, but that's a double-edged sword, because there are platforms that say, these are vetted candidates, but they've never actually met a human. They've just clicked buttons and passed, technology prerequisites. With our agency, we have an in-house recruiter who personally interviews every single candidate. And so we have a network of nannies that we've acquired over the course of several years that we have personally interviewed to add to an upcoming community called the Nanny Link. And am I allowed to say a reference to a company kind of similar to LinkedIn? And essentially, it's a platform for nannies, family assistants, and house managers to connect with families who are seeking support direct. And when you've found that candidate in the community that you like, we have a vetting service. Background checks, DMV audits, reference checks, all the things. Our in-house recruiter will do all of that for you. So it'll give a lot of families direct access to more quality vetted candidates who have connected with a human and interviewed with a human, our in-house recruiter, before ever getting into that community.
How many members are currently in there?
Of approximately 3,000. Today.
I know I'm in New England. Are you guys in our area? Are you guys all over the country? Are you guys in Canada too?
We are nationwide, not in Canada. We are just in the United States. We do have applicants from Canada and Europe that do apply for our agency. We just do not vet them or source them because they're not legally authorized to work in the United States. And so there's another layer there before we ever break those barriers.
Well, Stephanie, thank you for sharing. I think I better understand now my own barriers for wanting to get help. I know I'm more progressive on it. Progressive is not the right word. I'm a little bit more wanting to get support than I think Alyssa, because I think she has a lot of that. I can do it myself. I don't need someone else parenting for me. Unless it's the grandparents, but I think I learned a lot about my own hurdles in this conversation, which I didn't necessarily know was going to happen.
Well, I'm glad that it could uncover that for you.
I know if people want to get in contact with you and or your services, hellonanny.com and or hellonanny on Instagram. I guess get some pretty good stuff over there. Any last words to leave people with?
Support is your superpower.
Amen. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Zach.